Okay, I'm live on both Facebook and YouTube. This is exciting. Thank you to the miracle of the internet. I can be Padre Pio. I'm in two places at once, just like Sunday Mass, I suppose. Hello, Casey. Hello, Melvin. Hello, Megan. Looking kind of shady. It's called a beard, Megan. Anyway, so thank you for joining. Hopefully, some folks will join in later as well. We do have one viewer on YouTube. Welcome. So some people ask to put it on YouTube so that they can search for it later because they won't be able to watch live. Just so you all know, this is raw and unscripted. So to tell the story in too confusing a manner. Try not to pull a Terrence Malick and just kind of tell it non-linearly. Just try and give a clear beginning to end. So I've told my story a lot. There's different lengths and levels of detail depending on the situation. So I'm happy to tell it. So let me mute my phone here. Okay. Lisa. Oh, Rocco. Hello, Rocco. Good to see you. Sort of, I guess. Not seeing you, but it's good to know you're there. And all you and all those who are yet to come and all who are watching this later, God bless and welcome. So let's begin with a prayer. And I would invite all of you too in your daily prayers to pray for vocations, because we're all called to give our lives to God somehow, because that's why Jesus came. He came, did that, so that God would have the chance to have all of us forever. And Jesus invites us to give our lives to him as he gave his life to us. That's what vocation is all about, is answering that invitation to give yourself to him. And ultimately, it's a choice that we make. We choose how to give our lives to him. He knows what will satisfy us, what will lead to the most joy and fulfillment in this life. But ultimately, it leaves the choice up to us because it's our life. He gave it to us. Only we can freely choose to give it back to him. And he wants us to do that as an act of love and complete self-offering and sacrifice in imitation of his son. Hello, Josh and Kathy and Bonnie. It's skipping. I'm so sorry, Lisa. It's also on YouTube. I don't know if that would make a difference or not. We'll see. Might be better quality on one or the other. I don't know. Oh my goodness, Victoria. Speaking of vocation. Hello. It's good to see you. I remember sharing my vocation story with you as we were hiking in the Badlands. That seems like it was forever ago. It is both a pleasure and an honor to have you here, Victoria. Hello, Jeffrey. September. Oh, good. I'm glad the skipping stopped, Lisa. And Rocco says hi again. Yes. Oh, Rocco, you're such a good little soul. So let's pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good and gracious God, we thank you for the gift and blessing of this night, for this gathering of souls across many miles, some cases across this earth that you have made. We thank you especially for the gift of your Son, that out of obedience for you and love for you and for us, he would become one of us to make an offering of himself to us, to show us the absolute extent of your love, which has no limit and no end. We ask you, Father, to bless this night, to send your Spirit to me to help me to have a clear memory and recollection of the way that you've been at work in my life, calling me to the priesthood. Pray that you grant the grace that this story may not only be edifying and enjoyable, but also moving to those who are listening to your call in their own hearts, that this story may serve to call more men and women to your service, especially to consecrated and religious life and to the priesthood. The intercession of St. Ignatius and Our Lady, bless this time. Ward off any attempts by the evil one to disrupt this conversation, this broadcast. Let it continue in peace. And let your joy and blessing be present among all of us this night. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Yes, Ave Maria. No bats. Yes. Remind me sometime, Josh, to tell you a story about a bat. Thank you, Victoria. I really cherish your prayers. I really do. So, vocation story time. In past lives, I've shared parts of my vocation story, but I thought because of the occasion of today, I thought I'd share it in one kind of continuous stream of narration. Today is significant because a significant moment in my vocation story happened 15 years ago today. So every time the first 5 days of September roll around, every year for the last 15 years, I really think about my vocation and kind of the tipping point toward making a decision. And it happened September 1st through the 5th of 2005. So we'll start at the beginning and then we'll move toward the end, shall we? So I grew up in a nominally Catholic family, which is to say we were Catholic, but really all that meant was went to Mass on Sunday, went to Sunday school / CCD during the week when we got older. We prayed before meals. When we were little, we prayed before bed, but it was an Our Father, Hail Mary, and a Glory Be, I think. But the practice of our faith didn't really, that I recall, go beyond that. It wasn't kind of a part of our family culture. We didn't have really conversations about God. Hello, Joe. Welcome. Good to see you on YouTube. We didn't, celebrate feast days. Christmas and Easter we celebrated, certainly. But yeah, so we were just nominally Catholic. And looking at the people who went to our parish, it seemed like very normal level of Catholicism. I only remember a couple of people who I thought were going kind of above and beyond the call of duty, praying the rosary a lot and things like that. So the first kind of inkling of vocation really came when one time, I think I must have been in 7th or 8th grade, I'd kind of put aside wanting to be a paleontologist in 4th grade, wanting to be an astronaut in 6th grade. But something happened in 6th grade, and I don't quite know what, but this desire awakened in my heart for marriage and fatherhood. And I think part of it had to do with how the 6th grade started. Because prior to the 6th grade, I wouldn't say I was a popular kid, but I had a lot of friends. People liked me. I was generally accepted socially, I guess. But the first week of 6th grade, my family and I were on vacation. So I missed the first week of school. And those of you who think back to your days of elementary and middle school, that first week is really important because that's when you reconnect with your friends after not seeing them for the summer. And it's kind of like Harry Potter, right? Everybody puts on the sorting hat and you get sorted out into your cliques for the year. So I missed that. And so when I came to school, the second week of school, which was my first week in 6th grade, everybody kind of reconnected, established their social circles. And I was kind of left with what was left, the leftovers. And so I became friends with a couple of guys that I'd never really kind of given a social thought toward. And I became suddenly kind of a bit of a social outcast. I was one of the nerds. And for the first time, I found I only had a couple of friends, like literally two that I could think of. And I liked them, especially one in particular, Sean O'Dean, because I found we had a lot in common, a lot of common interests. We both liked Star Wars a ton. The other kid, his name was Willie, and he was a nice kid, but the longer I got to know him, the stranger he became, and we didn't end up being friends for very long. But I was really grateful to be friends with Sean. We had a ton of fun together, so much fun. And I was really, really grateful that I had a friend like him during that time. But I did, for the first time in my young life, feel lonely. And I think that loneliness awakened a desire in me, not just for friendship, but a deep level of companionship. I very much desired to be known and loved, and I had a deep desire to know someone and love them deeply. Right around that time, I also developed a deep appreciation for all things beautiful. Before that, I didn't really have a sense of beautiful. I'm more a sense of maybe pretty, like, oh, this girl's pretty or this girl's pretty. But I didn't have a sense of looking at a piece of art and be like, whoa, wow. Or an appreciation for walking in the woods and saying, this is so beautiful, or a beautiful sunset. So I'm like, oh, that's nice and that's pretty. But I think that loneliness and that sense of being kind of left out of the wider world, and kind of marginalized for no reason, really, awakened this desire and this recognition of what's beauty. It's like since I wasn't distracted by all these other things of what's popular, what's in, what's out, I was able to start seeing things that I hadn't noticed before. And one of those things was the music we were listening to in music class. And I remember it was sixth grade. We were listening to Aaron Copland's Appalachian Springs, where he does some things with the melody of the Shaker tune, Simple Gifts. And, in music class and even in Looney Tunes, you're hearing classical music all the time. And I never really paid attention to it. The prior year, fifth grade, Jurassic Park came out, and my girlfriend at the time, who dumped me because I loved dinosaurs more than her, true story, had given me on cassette tape the Jurassic Park soundtrack. And I played it, and I was like, oh, this is boring. There's nothing about dinosaurs in here at all. But in music class one day, it was taught by Sylvia Gould, who just passed away. God rest her beautiful soul. She played Appalachian Springs, and I was struck by how lovely it was. And I really relished the sensation I felt interiorly when I listened to it. And I remember going up to her afterwards, like, could I get a copy of this? And she says, yeah, just bring a blank cassette tape and I'll make a recording for you. She seemed shocked that one of her students would ask for a copy of that. Looking back, I don't think the students in my class really appreciated what she was offering us at that time. And I think she was just really excited that one of her students seemed to appreciate what she was trying to share with us. So I did bring that cassette tape, and she recorded it off the record that she was playing for us. And I remember listening to it a lot and just like, wow. And then I began to think, what else is out there? And that's when I discovered Mozart and Beethoven. And I started listening to film scores. I started paying attention to the music in movies. And I revisited Jurassic Park and really loved it. There's the theme, the da 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 da. which is kind of the main theme to Jurassic Park. And when I first heard that track, when the string section plays that first chord, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that first experience. I was like, I don't know if I've ever heard such a beautiful sound before. And so I began to listen to that soundtrack, and I started listening again to music in movies and borrowing CDs that my mom had and falling in love with the Last of the Mohicans soundtrack that my mom had. And this was all on cassette tape at the time. And just really, really, really enjoying it. And so just beginning this relationship with what was beautiful. And again, it was awakened by this social loneliness and not understanding why is it that everybody just brushes me off as a nerd and a geek, and nobody, I'm not getting invited to birthday parties anymore, and nobody really wants to be around me in school except for like this one friend. um and that's, I also learned to like stop caring about that. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. It's nothing that I did. They just don't understand me, and I don't want to be a part of that anyway. And so I really began to learn how to kind of embrace myself, and accept myself for who I was, and just like the things that I like and not care about what other people thought about it. Um, but yeah, noticing beauty. It was the next year, seventh grade, that I first encountered a young lady that I thought was beautiful. Now, it turned out she wasn't as um, virtuous as I made up in my head, because I never really got to know her that well. But I was really thunderstruck by how beautiful, at least exteriorly, that I thought she was. Um, Even though at the time, girls were still like icky and scary. Suddenly it's like, no, that changed. But I don't think it was because there were changes going on, if you know what I mean. But there had been a change interiorly, that I began to see the world differently. And I was just absolutely struck by how beautiful she was, and noticed the feelings of kind of awe and terror that beauty awakened in me. Um, so it wasn't so much a desire to possess, but I felt like I was witnessing something that put me in my place. And it was a position of awe and humility before something that had a vastness to it that I couldn't quite um, define or identify. I also started getting more into music in band, and paying attention to that, and actually practicing and enjoying uh, playing music and wanting to get better at it, and finding that I'm able to enjoy what I play. So it's not just a mechanical um, function that I'm performing, but there's a part of me that's going into what I'm playing. Even though middle school tenor saxophone music is hardly complicated, I really began to enjoy it and appreciate it. And I just was always on the lookout for beauty. And that, I think, led me through my middle school years up to the point of high school. Uh, so late eighth grade and then into freshman year was where I think beauty was leading me to an appreciation for virtue. And I think part of it had to do with the disappointment of finding out that this girl that I thought was just so beautiful, and it was kind of this very human encounter with what was beautiful, finding out her personality and kind of the behind the scenes life that she was living, I was really not so much scandalized as I was deeply disappointed, because it revealed to me that sometimes beauty is only skin deep, where I was hoping and assuming that the beauty that I saw on the outside permeated throughout her whole being. And I think sincerely, she wanted to be a good person, but she just didn't have the virtue instilled in her, and practiced up and strengthened to be able to live as the good person she desired to be. And so, I don't want to dismiss her or marginalize her because of that. But finding out what she was kind of really like behind the scenes really struck a deep blow to me. And it made me realize that part of what I appreciated so much about beauty was its virtue and its goodness. And I could certainly appreciate the beauty of nature and of music because it's good thoroughly. It's thoroughly good. The beauty of Beethoven's music goes all the way through. There isn't some hidden kind of badness under it. But when it comes to the beauty of people, I learned that you need to be able to appreciate the beauty that you see separately from the person, so that what you're seeing on the outside isn't how you're defining them or assuming they are. You want to assume the best in people, but sometimes there's an incongruity, an inconsistency, a lack of, I guess, integrity. And so I became a little more guarded, but it also made me think about myself. I have never, and I still don't, consider myself an attractive person or handsome or whatever. Some people very kindly insist that I am for various reasons. And I have, yes, been referred to as Father What a Waste a few times, whatever. Too late, ladies. Taken. Yeah. So I really began to look at myself like, okay, well, I wasn't blessed with any exterior beauty that's going to catch anybody's eye, but I can be beautiful interiorly. And I do care about what's going on in here, and that how I live my life is an outward expression of who I truly am. And so that awareness was starting to form. And I think that is what produced the fertile seed ground for kind of the first planting of my vocation, which, as I mentioned, happened somewhere around 7th or 8th grade. My cousin Eric Webster, who was a convert from Protestantism, was spending time with my dad turkey hunting. So it must have been spring. And I was folding laundry on the dining room table. And he was kind of leaning on the door frame to the kitchen in his camel pants and a t-shirt, sipping on a Bud Light, I think, and watching me fold laundry. And then just out of the blue, he said, "Jacob, I think you've got the right attitude to be a priest." And I just kind of looked at him and shrugged it off, like, whatever, I'm not interested in that. And I thought nothing more of it. I remember sometime months later, maybe even a year later, at CCD class on Thursday night, eating potato chips and drinking Sprite and talking to one of my friends. For some reason, the topic of priesthood came up, and I said, it wouldn't be that bad. You only have to work on the weekends. Your boss is miles and miles away. You get a free house, and you can just go hunting and chill out during the week. But, the whole not getting married thing, I couldn't do that. I want to get married and have kids. Because, as I mentioned before, like that desire for deep, loving companionship and self-gift really awakened hard in 6th grade. I don't remember any other career paths that I was interested in pursuing, except in high school, I really wanted to be an orchestra conductor, because my passion for music was pretty strong at that point. But I wasn't wed to that idea. I just wanted to be a dad. In fact, ideally, a stay-at-home dad with 15 kids. I don't know why the number 15 was always there, but I wanted a huge family. So my cousins saw the potential for priesthood in me pretty early on. I shrugged it off, talked about it only once that I can remember. The desire to live a life of integrity and what I would call now virtue was awakening in me, an appreciation for beauty, was very strong. And so my freshman year of high school, I had made a new friend, and not just a new friend, but a best friend. His name was Billy. He was new to our school in 8th grade. And yes, Uncle Mitch, it's true. We've got music in our blood. Great musician, by the way. If you like blues, he can tear you apart on the saxophone. He's awesome. So there was a moment in my freshman life where a friend of mine called, who was the girlfriend of my best friend. She was a year older than us. No, 2 years older. Yeah, I think 2 years older. She was a junior, we were freshmen. But she was dating my best friend. And I become friends with her because she was a very nerdy person, and so was I. And we nerds have to flock together. And then also her being the girlfriend of my best friend, it's inevitable that we're going to become acquainted. And so she called me one day. It was evening. I was washing dishes. My dad was cooking something on the stovetop. And so the phone rang. I picked it up off the wall, answered it. It was her. And she asked me if I was interested in coming over to watch a movie. And so I asked my dad, because I couldn't drive at that point. So either he would have to take me or she'd have to come get me. And he asked if her parents were home. So I asked her, and she said, no, they're out bowling, but they'd be home in an hour, hour and a half. So it wouldn't be out super late. So I told him that. And he said, well, you can't go. And I was really confused by that. And I told her I couldn't go. I thanked her for inviting me, and I hung up. And I asked my dad why. Because growing up, I was, not to say my siblings were terrible, but I was the good kid. I was always obedient. I always did what I was asked. My parents trusted me very much. So I was never told no, not because I was spoiled, but because I was trustworthy. So this was really the first time I'd been told no. And so I asked my dad, why can't I go? And he said, well, I was your age once, and you just don't need to be in that kind of situation. And that's that. And so I walked away stunned because I felt like my dad was totally misjudging my character and assuming that I was like he was in high school, whatever that meant. I don't know a lot of his backstory. Uncle Mitch probably does, but we won't go there. But I also felt like he assumed like I was like any other guy in my high school who is just interested in one thing when it comes to girls. So I felt very misjudged, mischaracterized. It felt unfair. And I was really hurt by that. But what it did do was awaken in me the realization that my dad didn't really know me like I knew me, like people at school knew me, because he's not at school. He's at work, and then he's at home. So he only sees me at home. And our home was a safe place. I wasn't ever really challenged in my moral decision making. Everything was safe. I was never really tempted to do anything stupid or bad in a moral sense. I did plenty of stupid, reckless things. It's amazing I have both eyes and all my fingers and toes. But I wasn't ever challenged on the level of my personal integrity. Whereas at school I was, I was constantly being told I was gay because I treated girls with respect. And I wasn't interested in girls just for what I could get out of them. A lot of girls were my friends or acquaintances and liked me because I was so respectful. I remember one time as a freshman in band, some older guys picking on me, and a bunch of senior girls coming to my rescue and telling them to back off. And they did. Because wow, senior girls are on Bodeker's side. And it was because I respected them and they liked that. And so that's how I was seen at school. But at home, that wasn't an issue. And so I realized, if living a virtuous life, living a life of integrity is something I want to do, I need to find a way to live my life such that whether I'm at home or at school, I'm the same person and people know who I am by what I do and what I say and how I do it and how I say it. Instead of it being kind of this Clark Kent Superman thing where, at home I'm a mild-mannered, obedient son, and at school I'm living kind of this heroic moral life, sort of. I needed to be the same person across the board. Now, had I been better catechized and stronger in my faith, I might have turned to the Gospels or the lives of the saints. But I didn't know anything about that stuff. However, I was into kind of medieval fantasy, King Arthur and Merlin and Tales of Knights and things like that. My favorite movies at the time were like Last of the Mohicans, First Knight, Dragonheart, where you had these men who were heroic and kind of chivalrous and virtuous to a degree with Last of the Mohicans. But there was a level of heroism that was more less of the fantastic like Batman, Superman, superhero stuff, but it was like a hero of a level that I thought could be reasonably attained by myself. That it was less about what your powers were, but more about your interior strength of character and courage and whatnot. Later on, Braveheart would be added to that list. And so, inspired by that kind of a thing, that night I decided I want to try and live as a knight, a life of chivalry and virtue and courage and service. And so I made my own oaths of chivalry using the formula from the film Dragonheart. A knight is sworn to valor. His heart knows only virtue. His blade defends the helpless. His might upholds the weak. His word speaks only truth. His wrath undoes the wicked. Every morning and every evening, and random points during the day, if I felt like it, I would recite those vows and try to live as best I could. Now, I wasn't going around picking fights against the wicked people I saw in my school, but, looking for opportunities to serve and to put myself aside for the sake of others, to be respectful, to always tell the truth. That was the big thing. That was my sword. As I tried very, very hard never to lie, even in the smallest things. And at first it was very hard, but as we know with virtue, the more you practice it, the easier it gets. Just like when you're trying to strengthen a muscle group, the more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. Virtues are the same way. If you want to overcome lying, tell the truth all the time. And at first it'll be really hard because it's contrary to the vice that you've developed in lying. But the more you tell the truth, the easier it gets. Same with chastity and temperance and all the virtues. The more you practice, the easier it gets. And so as time went on through high school, people started to notice that and expect it of me. I was holding doors for people, or even for whole classes as they were passing through a doorway on their way to lunch. I would hold that door until the last person went through or somebody volunteered to take over for me. If I saw somebody struggling to carry somebody out something, I would offer to help. If I saw somebody who seemed upset, I would ask, "Are you okay?" And, I became a confidant of many young women in my school because they trusted me and they knew that I wasn't being nice in order to get something later. They actually trusted me. And so I'd be sitting by my locker working on something or chilling out between classes or at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. And sometimes the young lady would just sit down next to me. It's like, "Can I talk to you?" Like, "Sure." So already I was practicing my priesthood without knowing it. But again, I was very lonely. I was already looking for Mrs. Boddicker. Wasn't interesting, like, "Oh, let's date and have fun." I was like, no, I'm looking for my future wife, which I think ended up sabotaging the few times I did fall in love in high school. The first was with actually my best friend's girlfriend. I mean, after they broke up, of course. Um, but I found her not only to be physically attractive, but also there was a level of virtue and goodness that I saw. But it turned out that when I finally revealed my feelings to her, and I said, I'd do anything for you. I love you. And she asked me if I really would do anything for her, I should stop loving her, which was pretty heartbreaking to hear. That was not how I thought that conversation would go. But I promised that I would try to let go of those feelings and just remain friends. It was very difficult to kind of kill that love and that desire, but you know, eventually did with the help of God. But it was really heartbreaking because that was the first time I really put my heart out there, and I felt like it got not just spurned, but thrown away, to cast out. So it was a couple years before I dared open my heart again. And she and I remained friends, praise the Lord. Um, but a couple years later, my junior year of high school, uh, I was very much falling in love with another young lady who the first thing that attracted me to her was her virtue. She was very modest. She always wore full length skirts. She was very kind. I remember once there was a special needs student. I think he had Down syndrome. We're in the cafeteria. I was sitting next to her. We're just visiting, sitting on the floor next to the wall. And he's walking up this incline and slips and falls and starts crying out because he was upset. I don't think he was hurt, but he was sad and upset, and he was calling out for his mother, who wasn't there, of course. And people are pointing and laughing, and he immediately crawls to this girl that I'm sitting by. And she kind of just takes him in and puts her arm around him and says, "Oh, it's okay. You're okay. You're not hurt." And I was so moved by his instinct to go to her, even though they didn't know each other. But I think he just saw her kindness, just her kind character. But also, as it's it confirmed for me that what I seemed to see of her virtue was true, that it was in there. So I wasn't mistaken. And so I just found myself falling more and more in love with this beautiful, virtuous young woman. Time comes around for prom, and I'm thinking, there's no way, I don't want to screw this friendship up by trying to ask her out for prom, because she probably doesn't think that way about me. Because I did not think of prom as you could just go with a friend. I thought it's for couples. It's kind of it's a very romantic time. It's serious. I know better now. But I was too scared to ask her because I was scared of being rejected. But one day she said, "Hey, do you have plans for prom?" I said, "Oh, no, I'm probably not going to go this year." And so she said, "Oh, well, I was kind of hoping that we could go together." And I thought, hallelujah, she feels the same about me as I do her. And so I said, "Well, yeah, I would love to go with you." So she said, "Great, awesome." And so I thought, okay, this is it. This is the big time. She does like me. Otherwise, why would she ask me to prom? So here I was jumping in conclusions, feeling like, okay, someone fell in love with me this time. So prom was wonderful. She wore a beautiful red dress with a shawl for modesty's sake. I wore a pinstripe zoot suit with a fedora. My mom let me borrow her red convertible. So yeah, it was a very classy evening, and we had a lot of fun. But that night, came back to our place for a little picnic, and we watched a movie, and I told her how I felt about her. And she was very quiet the rest of the night, but she didn't say no. And so that whole week afterwards, I was kind of hopeful, But I found she was avoiding me, and it was really difficult. And so that following weekend, she wanted to get together to talk. So we went on a walk in the woods, and she gave me a note, basically laying out like how grateful she was for our friendship, but she was getting ready to go off to college. She was still healing from a previous breakup that didn't go well, and she just didn't feel like getting into a deeper relationship right now would be a good idea. So I appreciated her honesty, but it still hurt. Because again, I'd kind of risked my heart, put it out there. And even though it was politely rejected, it was nonetheless rejected. And I also thought like I'd seen signs of like mutual affection. But I think what I was confusing was I was confusing kindness and friendship for something more. Because again, I was in a lot of ways still so lonely that kind of charity I was mistaking for a different level of love. I was mistaking agape and philos for eros. It would be a while before I could learn the difference. And so, the school year went on, end of the year came. I tried to spend time with her in the summer, but either she wouldn't answer my calls, or, she's busy or whatever. But when I heard she was getting ready to go off to college, I tried calling her to no avail and missed getting to say goodbye to her. And then the day after she left for college, I spent time with my previous crush, who, again, we were still friends, because she was getting ready to go back to school. And she asked me why I wasn't at this girl's graduation party the night before, or going away party. I said, well, I wasn't invited. She said, I thought you and so-and-so were still friends. I thought we were too. And then it was revealed to me that she was going back out with her ex-boyfriend, who she would later marry. And I was devastated. I realized like she'd been lying to me this whole summer and avoiding me. So that was crushing. I felt so betrayed. And so my senior year, when I noticed feelings awakening for another young lady who I was friends with, I told her very early on. And she said, I just see you as a friend. So I squelched that very quickly. And now you might think, well, why is he telling us all this high school drama, for crying out loud? What does this have to do with his vocation? What it has to do with my vocation is my heart was broken many times. And so when I went into college, my heart was very, very, very guarded. And even though I had a deep appreciation for beauty, for virtue, I was trying to live a virtuous life. My heart was very wary of love, even though it was very hungry for it and very desirous of it, wanting to give itself out of love, wanting to be loved in return. But every time I went that way, I was very painfully rejected, betrayed, whatever. After high school, I'd find out my best friend was living like this double life. And I felt like he'd been lying to me for 5 years about who he really was. And so I had a lot of heartbreak going into college. When I got to college, the University of Wyoming, I remember my first night in my dorm room. I was by myself. My roommate was away at marching band camp, so I hadn't met him yet. And I was getting ready to set my alarm. It was Saturday night, and I realized, oh, tomorrow's Sunday. It's church day. And then I realized my parents aren't here. They're not going to make me go to church. Do I even want to go? Because church for me was just something we had to do on Sundays, because Dad woke us up at 9, brush our teeth, get dressed, pick up some folks at the elderly home, go to Mass, come home, eat burgers, mow the lawn. That was Sunday. But nobody was there to make me go to church. I found Mass pretty boring. That's why I altar served, because it gave me something to do. I had no idea the Eucharist was Jesus. I had no idea the meaning of anything. Never really paid attention. We had a really good priest in the sense he was very kind and sweet, and everyone loved him. But I don't remember anything that he preached or what his homilies were like, because I just didn't care about any of that. And so I was not heavily inclined to continue going to Mass in college. However, just the way that I was raised, and again, that importance of integrity and virtue. One of the guidelines, in addition to those vows I made, is I found the 10 Commandments to be kind of helpful. And so as I was contemplating not going to Mass, the commandments were coming to mind because I realized, going to Mass is really important for my dad. And so eventually he's going to call and see how I'm doing and ask, have I found a church to go to? A Catholic church, no other church. So I had a couple of possibilities before me. I could lie and say, oh, yeah, I found a really nice church to go to every Sunday. Sure, yep. Or I could say, no, I don't really want to go to church anymore, Dad. Or I could keep going and then not have to worry about lying or disappointing. So I realized in lying, I was breaking 3 commandments. I was failing to keep the Sabbath. I was dishonoring my father by lying to him and by not going to Mass when I knew it was important to him that I go. And I was lying, which also goes against my nightly vows. If I stopped going to Mass and told the truth, I'm still violating the commandment of the Sabbath and dishonoring my father by not going to Mass. If I kept going to Mass, I would be breaking 0 commandments. So I decided, okay, until I can find a good reason not to go to Mass anymore, I have to keep going. Turns out there is no good reason. So if you're thinking about doing the research yourself, I have saved you the trouble. But going to Mass ended up being, I would say, a decision that steered me on the course to my current life. In that, I had family that went there, an aunt and an uncle and cousins, and another aunt and uncle, actually. But the one that had children, they invited me every Sunday to come back home with them. I could do my laundry for free, get a home-cooked lunch, and watch Disney movies with my little cousins all afternoon. And then they'd bring me back to my dorm, and if I needed to run out to Walmart first, that was fine. So Sundays, I started to love Sundays because of what happened after church. Also, I started to feel very homesick because I didn't know how to make friends when the social pool was so massive, like a university. I didn't even know where to start. The only friend I had was my roommate. And so I started to feel kind of lonely and homesick, super homesick, especially in the fall. Because around, in Laramie, the fall is very different and there isn't a harvest and there isn't high school football. There's college football, but that's crazy. And I just started to miss home and miss the familiar. And one day at Mass, while we were singing Holy, 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 God of Power and Might back in those days, I remember thinking, man, I know this song because I've sung it my whole life. And I know the Our Father, and I know this and that, and I know when to stand and when to kneel. And I realized back home in Iowa, my family was doing the same thing on Sunday morning. And I thought, oh, it's kind of like we're together at church. We're doing the same thing, hearing the same readings, praying the same prayers. And the homesickness just vanished. And so Mass started to become a way for me to be connected to the people I loved and the people I missed. And it's where I felt at home, no matter where I went. And it was shortly after that, at a kind of youth night, that I met a couple other guys who went to school and also went to that church, who were into the Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and nerdy things. So I made 2 friends that night. They invited me to go to a movie the next night, and I met all their friends. And suddenly I went from having 1 friend to having 3 to having a dozen. And they were my friends throughout that rest of the school year and the year to come. And it was a great, great gift. That spring, I think it was February, so I remember there was still quite a bit of snow on the ground. Those 2 church friends invited me to go on a retreat. And for those of you who've done college retreats, it's a search retreat. I'd never heard of such a thing before. When they said, "Hey, Jake, you want to go on a retreat?" I said, "From what?" And they laughed. Like, "No, like a retreat." I was like, "Yeah, from what? What are we retreating from?" They said, "It's not like that. It's a church thing. You know, you spend a weekend with a lot of quiet, a lot of prayer, and, you know, that kind of a thing." I was like, "That sounds really boring. So I'm going to pass." And they said, "Well, but so-and-so is going to be there, so-so, and it's really fun." And I said, "Well, okay, I'll give it a shot." And that retreat was really important because there was one moment where we're all in this big space together, and the priest from the church came to be available for confession. He stood at the end of the room, and everybody who wanted to go to confession would line up and go to him one at a time, and they would have their sins written down on a piece of paper. And then after they went to confession, they'd drop it in this kind of coffee can that had burning alcohol in it. So the paper would burn up. And I noticed all these college students from freshman to super senior lined up, and a lot of them, men and women, crying their eyes out. I didn't realize at the time why, but I realize now is the prayers and activities of the preceding hours and day of the retreat had awakened a deep sense of contrition in them. And they were weeping for their sins. And some of those students weren't even Catholic. And so for non-Catholic students, they could just talk to Father about what they're struggling with and have prayers said, even though they couldn't receive the sacrament. So I saw all these college students in line weeping and afraid and trembling, and sometimes having to sit on the floor because they're so overwhelmed. And then they talk to the priest. And then they go away standing a little taller, smiling through their tears and crying out of joy. And one by one, I saw that change in each person. And I realized something's happening over there. Something's happening inside those people when they come to the priest. I didn't have that kind of experience of confession because, again, I didn't have that level of self-awareness of my own sins and my need for God's mercy. But I saw it and I realized there's something about this Catholic thing that other churches don't have. And I realized the power of the sacrament of confession was what I was seeing. And so after that retreat, I really came to embrace my Catholic identity. It's like, I like being Catholic. And I want to stay Catholic. I don't want to leave it or join another church ever. This is who I am. This is a part of who I am. That didn't lead me to want to learn more or grow in it, but it definitely, I made my choice. And Catholic was part of who I was. Finished that first year of school, came home to Iowa, and at my sister's high school graduation party, I met, all her friends and stuff. And there was one new friend, a new girl who had moved it to Tipton that year, and her name was Christina. And she's pretty, but, again, I didn't think of myself as being that attractive, so I didn't think anything of it. But throughout the rest of the summer, she would come and visit my sister, come and hang out with her, or come pick her up to take her somewhere so they could go hang out, whatever. And the more often she came over, the more time she was spending around me. And I remember one time she and my sister were going to go off and do something, and Christina was there watching me play a video game, and my sister came down and said, "All right, I'm ready, let's go." And so Christina says, well, I'll see you later. And she gave me a hug and left. And I just kept playing. And my brother, Michael, was working on his computer and typing away. And after a little bit, I noticed he had stopped. And I looked and he was just staring at me. I was like, what? He said, did you not notice that? I said, what, Christina? Giving me a hug? Yeah. She ever do that before? No, why? And he just looked at me and I was like, oh my gosh, that hasn't happened before. And so as the summer kind of unfolded, it became clear that she really liked me. I didn't think that was possible because, again, my heart was shut off. It was in protection mode. I had decided I would not risk loving anyone unless I knew for a fact they loved me first. So I would only respond to love. I would never initiate it again, ever. I was too hurt. I was done. And so when she let me know that she really, really liked me a lot, then I let my guard down and started to let myself like her back. And so that began my first relationship ever. And we were together for a year and a half. We dated long distance over the miles when I went back to Wyoming and she was still in Iowa. And during my time, that second year, I was starting to get into my classes for my major, which was archaeology. And as I started to study it, as much as I was interested in it, I began to think, I don't know if this is what I want to give my life to. I don't know if I want to spend the rest of my days till retirement doing this. Nothing against archaeologists. I just didn't feel like this is what I wanted to do. And so I remembered my favorite teachers in high school said, Jacob, you would be a good teacher. You should be a teacher. So I emailed them and asked them where I should go to school if I wanted to be a teacher. And they all said the University of Northern Iowa. So I applied to transfer and was accepted. My friends were devastated. And they thought the only reason I was transferring to Iowa was to be closer to my girlfriend, which was a side benefit, but it certainly wasn't a deciding factor. And my little cousins were really sad. One of my cousins wouldn't even talk to me the day I left. She was so mad at me. And they were all crying. Oh, gosh, I can still remember. So it was hard to leave, but I felt like I was making the right choice. First thing I did when I got to Northern Iowa was find a church, and lo and behold, there was one right off campus, St. Stephen's of Witness Catholic Student Center. I immediately got involved, made my first friends there, went to Mass there every Sunday and most Wednesday nights, and continued dating Christina. And by that point in our dating relationship, it had taken a very dark turn. I don't know how or why, but her personality really became very different. At first, she was very easygoing, happy, cheerful, bright as far as like personality, not like mentally. I'm not speaking to her mental capacity. But by that point in our relationship, she'd become kind of very dark and goth and sarcastic and negative. So I don't know what happened there. But also like immodest. And however, there were also things going on in my family that were very painful. And so I found myself retreating a lot into her arms, spending time with her family just to get away from mine, and really feeling like this is what I've got and I'm going to cling to it. We'd been together for a year. I was starting to think maybe she's the one. I should think about maybe talking to her parents. But my fear of losing that relationship really blinded me to a lot of the unhealthy and sinful aspects of it. Not to say that we were sexually active, but there was a lot of other unchaste things going on, mainly for the sake of making her happy, but also feeling like I was loving someone and being loved in return. But a few months into my second year, or my first year at Northern Iowa, it was mid-November. She wanted me to come home to talk about some things. And I was kind of nervous, but I thought, well, it's an opportunity to see my girlfriend, so okay. And so I went, and sure enough, she wanted to tell me that she didn't think that we had a future together. And I had always promised her from the first day we officially started going out, I would always love her until she asked me not to anymore. And so I said, "Are you asking me not to love you anymore?" She said, "Yes." So I said, "Okay." So our relationship ended after a year and a half. And in the days after that, they were initially very lonely and sad, but I respected her wishes. Her mom was devastated. Her mom wanted a lot of kids, but only had her. And so she really saw me as a son. And so I think it was harder for her mom to go through the breakup than it was for me. But in the days that followed, I began to realize all the kind of unhealthy and negative aspects of our relationship. And eventually, my best friend was able to get the truth out of her as to why she was breaking up. And it was because I was adamant about waiting for marriage to engage in intimacy. She was tired of waiting. So she broke up with me in the hopes of finding somebody who was not wanting to wait. And I found that very crushing because it made me start to question all that other stuff that I've shared, all the heartbreak I'd already endured, my efforts to live a life of integrity, of doing the right thing. And here I was being punished for doing the right thing. Whereas previously, for the most part, I'd enjoyed kind of the rewards that come with living a virtuous life. But in this moment, it seemed like doing what I thought was a virtuous thing ended up being the wrong thing. I know better now. And so I was kind of heartbroken over all that. I dropped my education major, realized I did not have a deep call to be a teacher, which you need. It's not a job, it's a call. And I was studying history. I was bored with it, had no idea what I was going to do with it. And I was just totally lost in life. And so I share that drama to show that really broke me in such a way that I realized I did not know how to proceed. And no one else knew what I should do with my life. I had my sights, my heart set so much on getting married and having kids, and nothing else mattered, that when that seemed to be taken away from me, I realized I had no sense of direction in life at all. And no one else could give me really good advice on what to do next. And that is finally when I reached out to God. Because I knew God knows what I should do with my life. He put me here. I should ask him. Now, I had joined the Knights of Columbus my freshman year of college because, I'd always wanted to be a knight, saw myself as kind of a knight. And I thought, this is my opportunity to really be a knight. And part of joining the Knights of Columbus, at least back then, I assume it's the same now, even though they've changed a lot of things, is you receive a rosary and you promise always to carry it and to pray it as often as possible. No one had ever taught me how to pray the rosary, but I did carry it. I kept that promise. And so I thought, okay, I've heard the rosary is a really powerful prayer. So I'm going to pray as best I know how. I know, these single beads that's the Our Father, and then these 10 in a row, those are all Hail Marys. So I started to pray the rosary as often as I could. And on every Our Father, I would also pray for my intention, which was God give me comfort and grace because I'm scared, or guidance because I'm scared and I don't know what to do. And so I pray the rosary as often as possible, before bed, when waking up, on my way to classes, if I got to class early, if I got out early, before a test, after a test, whenever I had time, whenever I was bored, pray that rosary, even though it was just Our Fathers and Hail Marys. I just trusted, like, hopefully this will be enough for God to like give me a hint. And I prayed like that for a month. During that month of prayer, I also started again, looking back at my relationship, seeing the unhealthy and unholy aspects of it. And I remember going to the priest at the Newman Center or the student center and saying, I haven't been in confession a really long time, but I think I really need to go. And boy, was that a good confession. And I'd gotten to know that priest a bit by that point. And so, he was able to ask me some tough questions to help me realize some sins that I didn't think I needed to confess, but I did need to. And so, yeah, that was a lot. Dropped a lot of crap on the floor that day. But I felt like I was starting to get into a good relationship with God. Also, during that time, I began to see a friend of mine in a different way. Her name was Laura. And she was the RA 2 floors below where I lived in the dorm. And she was beautiful. She was athletic, blonde hair, bright green eyes, always smiling, kind, virtuous. She was everything I could have dreamed of. And yeah, kind. I think I mentioned that, but I was always struck by her kindness. And I'd started to get to know her because I'd overheard that she liked poetry. I was like, I write poems all the time. Here, I'll share some with you. But she also really knew Jesus. And I'd never met anybody that knew Jesus. I'd met people who knew about him, but she had a living relationship with Jesus. She was Methodist, but was always talking about God and about Jesus. And she led a Bible study that I joined. So like, I never really read the Bible, don't know much about it. And, but I also wanted to have what she had. But during that month after the breakup, I started to notice this is the kind of woman I've waited for my whole life. Because not only is she beautiful, like my previous girlfriend was, she's virtuous, like my previous girlfriend was not. But also, she's good for my soul, which my previous girlfriend definitely was not. And not only is she good for my soul, but she's going to lead me closer to God, which is really, if you love somebody, that's what you're going to do. So I began to fall in love with her real hard because she was just everything that I dreamed of. When I thought of like the ideal woman that I wanted to give my life to and for, she fit the bill perfectly. And I thought, surely this is from God. This is God saying, Jacob, this is the one you've been waiting for. You wasted that time with the previous girl. If you would have waited for me to reveal her to you, I would have shown you this one. And so that month of prayer, those feelings grew and deepened. And I began to share with her right away how I felt about her. I could never get her to share how she felt about me. But after a month of prayer, I remember sitting in the lounge of one of the dorms, and Laura was making cookies, Christmas cookies. Our friend Amanda was with us, and I was there because I was just bored. And we were chit-chatting. Amanda had to leave. And then Laura got done making a batch of cookies and said, I'm going to deliver these cookies. Could you stay here and watch all my stuff? And I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. So she went to deliver cookies for a while. And that's when I realized I didn't bring anything to do, and all the people I was chit-chatting with are gone. So there I was. Who knows how long I'd be there. All I had with me, was my rosary. So I'm like, all right, I'll just pray my rosary till she gets back. And I started praying. And halfway through the third decade, so right in the middle of the rosary, I found I couldn't stop praying the Hail Mary. And it was like my mouth and my voice were doing their thing, praying the Hail Mary. But mentally and interiorly, I was totally disengaged from it. And I was like, what's happening? It's like my body was just on autopilot. and I was free to roam around the cabin. And I was like, I can't stop praying. I also felt like there was this wind rushing through. It was this roaring wind. I felt cold. I felt like everything was moving by me really, really fast. I felt tiny. I felt like I was in the presence of something massive and powerful. And I was terrified. And I don't know how long that went on, but eventually Laura came back. And as soon as I heard the door open, it stopped. And I was just sitting there, shaking a little bit with tears streaming down my face, wondering what the crap just happened. And she went back to making cookies. And I was sitting there trying to process and understand what had just occurred. And eventually I felt like, okay, well, what was I doing? I was praying and asking God for guidance and comfort. Maybe that was God reaching out to me. But if it was God, like, wouldn't I have felt like happy about that? It was terrifying. And so eventually I asked Laura, Laura, can I ask you a question? She said, sure. I said, have you ever been touched by God? And she just nonchalantly said, no, but my sister has. I was like, well, good. Maybe that's what happened. Okay, what was it like? She said, oh, she described it as just the most beautiful and warm and loving experience of her life. I'm like, yeah, it's definitely not what I felt. And so she asked why I asked that. And she turned to look and saw that I was really disturbed. I was bothered and upset. So she came and sat by me and just put her hand on my back. And we talked about it. And I shared what had happened. And we prayed. And I was really, really consoled by that. And again, it just made me love her all the more. Like, wow, what a beautiful friend that I have. And the next day, I talked to my priest about it, and he encouraged me to keep praying, to not change anything, except when I pray, to let God know that I'm listening. Because he felt like that was God getting my attention. And boy, did he have it. So I kept praying. Meanwhile, my love for Laura continued to swell. And it got to the point, and some of you may have been at this point in your own romantic pursuits, where you can't stand to be around the other person because you love them so much. Your heart is just full of anxiety about the future. If they love you back, if they have the same feelings, you just don't know. And you just feel like your heart's going to run away or explode or do something embarrassing every time you're around them. And it's just unbearable. And so it was January. It was mid-January. And Big Bad Voodoo Daddy was coming to UNI. So they're a great swing big band. The dance floor is going to be open. And I had asked Laura if she wanted to go. And she said she'd love to. And my dad, Uncle Mitch, you were there. You and Brenda came. A couple other people. A couple of my friends from school also came. And Laura came. My dad was there. I think maybe my little brother, Matthew. So we're getting ready to go. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have nothing. I have no nice clothes, which is true. I had a nice pair of khaki pants, but I didn't have any nice tops. Certainly not for dancing with the woman of my dreams. And so our mutual friend Amanda and I went shopping, and I was telling Amanda how much I love Laura, and I'm so excited to be able to dance with her, and just how frustrated I was that here I am being very transparent with my heart, but I could never get kind of a straight answer from Laura. And Amanda says, well, you know about so-and-so, right? I'm like, who is so-and-so? Well, it's this guy from Oklahoma that she's trying to work things out with. I was like, there it is. That's why she wouldn't be transparent with her feelings about me. She didn't want to hurt my feelings. And so that night, the night before the concert, getting ready to pray my rosary before I go to bed, I said, God, I love Laura, and I'm so grateful that she's in my life. But she loves someone else, and I respect that. So I need you to help me to love Laura like you love Laura. Disinterested, unselfish, to love her just for the sake of loving her and not hoping for anything else. Help me, God, to be who she needs me to be instead of me trying to be the person I want to be and wish I could be for her. And so I prayed my rosary and just felt very at peace with that. And the next day, like, that anxiety was gone. And it's definitely one of those be careful what you pray for moments. Because when I said, God, help me love Laura like you love her, I did not mean that to mean what God took it as. So that anxiety went away. The concert happened. We danced. We went out for dinner. It was wonderful. And I remember my dad meeting her before the concert when we were getting ready to go to it. And he was there to pick me up and pick her up. And he met her, and she had to go pop into her room and grab her coat. And he turned to me and said, Jacob, she's a keeper. And I was like, I know, Dad. He really liked her. I don't know if you remember her, Mitch, but my dad was really impressed with her on first meeting. But I, again, had kind of let go of that. I was like, I just want to be her friend, be who she needs me to be. It was wonderful. None of that anxiety. And I was just so grateful to God for that friendship. So that was Saturday night. The next day was Sunday. And I'd been invited to start coming to RCIA to be a sponsor for a young man who had no Catholic family or friends, and he needed a sponsor. And so I was asked, well, sure. Well, that night at RCIA, one of the history professors was invited to give a lecture on the history of the Catholic Church in 1 hour. It was very impressive. I learned so much that I never knew before about the church in 1 hour. But one of the things he mentioned was the Jesuits. So think of all the things you would talk about in a 1 hour lecture on the history of the church. Yes, the Jesuits have been important and have left an impact, but I really think in such a lecture, you could skip over them. During that part of church history, you could probably just focus on the Reformation and Trent and be okay. But he mentioned the Jesuits. And I felt this kind of flash feeling of that experience I'd had in prayer a couple months prior of, I got chills up and down my spine, and I felt that presence again, just for a moment. And I turned to this sister that was sitting at my table and said, Sister, do you know anything about the Jesuits? And she pointed to a wall where there are all these like flyers and brochures. And she said, there's a brochure over there about the Jesuits you could read. I'm like, okay. So afterwards, I grabbed one, I read it. It's like, wow, these guys are really interesting. And I looked them up on the internet and was fascinated by what I was reading and learning about the Jesuits. I found this vocations director who you email if you want more information. So logged into my school email account. Dear Father, my name is Jake Boddicker. I'm a history major at University of Northern Iowa. I'd like to learn more about the Jesuits. Here's my mailing address. Please send me anything free. Sincerely, Jake Boddicker. Send. And then I got ready for bed. I was praying my rosary. But before I prayed it, I said, God, I've been asking you for guidance and comfort. You've given me comfort. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not anxious about Laura. I'm happy to be her friend. I'm not afraid about where my life's going. But you haven't given me any guidance. But I feel like tonight, when I heard about the Jesuits, you were trying to get my attention. So is this something you want me to look into and learn more about? And just, please tell me. And so I prayed. And at the same point in the rosary, halfway through the third decade, that I had that powerful experience again. But this time I wasn't afraid because I knew who it was. By that point, I realized that was God that I'd encountered. But he was a stranger to me then. I didn't know him. But now I knew who it was, and I wasn't scared. And even though I felt small, I felt safe. And though I was in the presence of tremendous power, I knew that power was on my side. So I wasn't afraid, and I felt so consoled. And I didn't hear a voice or see anything, but I felt in my heart of hearts that God was saying, yes, walk down this road and I will tell you when and if to turn from it. And so after I finished my rosary, I don't know how long that feeling went on, that experience. But after I'd done, I said, God, I promise you, I will pursue this Jesuit thing until it dead ends or you tell me to turn from it. And so the next morning, I emailed the vocation director and said, here's what's going on. And I just spilled it all, everything about, significant portions of my past, but also Laura and all this. I'm glad you remember, Mitch. Yeah, we went to Famous Dave's and got barbecue, and there were 4 of us sitting in the back of your truck, and Laura had to lay across all of our laps because there weren't enough seats. That was such a great night. So the vocations director called me the next morning at 8 a.m. and he swears to this day that he didn't. He's like, why would I do that to a college kid? It's like, I remember I was sleeping, my phone rang, I had to take out my retainer and throw it in the sink and try and sound awake. But he did send me a few books. He said, read these books, and when you've read enough and you're ready to talk again, get in touch with me. I read The Fifth Week, which is a short book that gives you it's like a primer on Jesuit history, spirituality, formation, etc. And it was interesting, but it wasn't until I read about the life of St. Ignatius that things started clicking. I was so impressed by him because I was sympathetic to him and I understood him. Because here he was, this guy he was a hopeless romantic with knightly and chivalric desires and a vision of himself. He was heroic. He had this huge conversion, overcoming himself to live a life of virtue and integrity. And I was just like, oh my gosh, yes, I get this guy. And then I read about Isaac Jogues, the heroic missionary to the native peoples of the northeastern United States. Miguel Pro, the heroic Jesuit priest during the Cristeros War. And I was like, wow, these guys sound like fairy tales, but they're real people. And these Jesuits are real. Oh my gosh, like, could I be a Jesuit someday? Could I stand with these heroic men and do what they did? That's crazy and exciting. And so the more I read, the more excited I got. I was like, I think this might be what God wants me to do. This is the guidance I've been praying for. Meanwhile, Laura and I continued to be friends. And one night in the cafeteria, I ran into her. And I said, hey, we haven't hung out in a while. She says, yeah, I know. I've been super busy. I said, what are you doing tonight? She said, I don't have anything after 8. I said, do you want to watch a movie? She said, sure. So she came by about 8. We looked through my vast DVD collection. Whatever reason, we settled on City of Angels starring Meg Ryan and Nicolas Cage. My memory of that movie was that it was a beautiful love story. It's theologically sloppy. Whereas, yes, the devil's spit barbecue sauce. I remember thinking it was hot then, but now I think it's mild. And I remember Laura insisted on paying the bill, but my dad would not let her. So anyway, my memory of that movie was it was a beautiful love story where an angel falls in love with a human woman and through some theological impossibility becomes human to be with her. But then she gets killed the day after in a tragic accident. And so, yeah, it's a movie about love and mystery and God, but also like tragedy and heartbreak and loss. I had forgotten about that part. I just remember the love story. It's like, oh, it's a good love story. And then it's got God and stuff. She'll like it. Well, by the end of the movie, she was bawling her eyes out. And I was like, wow, Boddicker, way to go. Hang out for the first time in weeks and you've got her weeping a storm. She'd used up all my Kleenexes. So there's this pile of used tissues on the floor. And she was still crying. And, I was just trying to like hug her from behind her chair and just like hoping it would stop. And it's like, man, I got to fix this. Because that's what immature men think they have to do when a woman is crying is they see it as a problem to be fixed rather than a hurt that needs healing, which you just got to be there with them and they'll stop crying when they're ready. You just got to trust in that. It's not a broken pipe that needs to be patched up. So, but I thought I needed to try and cheer her up. And so I started to tell her about what I'd been reading, these heroic, godly men, and about the Jesuits and things like that. And she was starting to calm down and listening and being impressed. And at the end of it, I remember saying something like, and I've been praying about this, and I think God might want me to be a Jesuit. Well, then she started crying harder. And I was very confused. And I thought, wow, this movie really got to her. And so just continued to be there with her and try to calm her down. I think I gave her a shoulder rub. And this is a part of my story I don't share very much, but it's been 15 years. So I think it's safe. She offered to give me a shoulder rub in return, which I wasn't going to say no to. And I remember just feeling like this is so great. Like, I'm glad I have such a good friend and glad we were able to salvage this evening after I ruined it with a sad movie. But there was one moment during that shoulder rub where she like ran her finger along the tip of my ear, which nobody had ever done before. And I didn't really pay attention to it then. But eventually she had to go because she had to, being an RA, she had to do rounds. So bid her good night, brushed my teeth, prayed my rosary, and thanked God for a wonderful evening, a wonderful friend. But the next day was Sunday. And I was in the shower, getting ready to go to mass. And I had long hair at the time. So showers took longer because, and ladies probably with me, it's like you got to shampoo, condition, work out all the knots, all that craziness. So I had plenty of time to reflect on the night before. And there were two things that I kept getting hung up on. One was crying, getting better, happier, mention the Jesuits, cry harder. And then the ear thing. And eventually I realized she likes me. And it was like being struck by lightning. And I was horrified, like all this time when I was wondering how she felt and she wouldn't tell me. Last night was like the proof I needed. That was her self-revelation of how she felt about me. And she cried harder because she thought I was saying, I'm going to go be a priest now and we're never going to be together. And that little ear thing was like kind of her showing a sign of affection for me, beyond just friends. So I finished showering, got dressed, dried off all that, and ran down to her room and knocked on her door, and she answered. I said, hey, can I talk to you? Okay. So she climbed back up in her loft. I was peeking out from under the blanket, and I was standing on the ladder to her bunk bed, just talking to her face to face. Like, I know why you cried last night. And she's like, it's stupid. Just forget about it. I know it is not stupid. I have been in love with you for months, and I've been so transparent with how I felt, but you would never share how you felt about me. And last night, I think it's because you like me and you don't want to lose me. If you want to be together, let's be together, or at least pray about it. If God wants us to be together, she continued to try and play it off. Don't worry about it, forget about it. And I said, no, I'm not giving up. And I'm going to be praying about this, praying if God wants me to be a Jesuit or be with you. But I'm not giving up on you. I love you, and I would love to be with you. And so from that day forward, anytime I had an opportunity to help her, to encourage her, to write poems for her, anytime I had an opportunity to show her that I loved her, I took advantage of that opportunity. I think that was the first weekend of February up until, early May. I think I wrote 80 some poems for her. I wrote her 12 poems for Valentine's Day because I didn't have any money to get her flowers. So I wrote her 12 poems instead of getting a dozen roses. And the only opportunity I had to deliver the packet of poems to her was when she was in the middle of having a Valentine's Day party with all the girls on her floor. So I embarrassed her by presenting her all these poems in front of all the other girls who all were like, oh, and she's, of course, embarrassed by it. And so that got all the girls on the floor thinking that I was in love with her, and I was very happy to say I am. And they're all hopeful that it all work out. So they're all watching this dramatic romance unfold. And I would write poems. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with ideas, and I'd write them, and I'd go down to her room and slip them under her door so she could find them when she woke up to go to the shower in the morning. I'd write them during class, and I'd slip them under her door or knock. If she'd answer, I'd give it to her. All throughout the day, most days, even if it was just a small poem or if it was a long one. And I remember getting to a point where I was like, man, I'm writing tons of poems. I should start keeping copies. And so I started filling a journal with them. And I thought, I wonder if she kept any of the ones I've already written so I could copy them down. And so I asked her, and she said, yeah, let me get them. She pulls out this big fat folder that's just bursting with sheets of paper and says, these are all of them and any notes and things you've written for me. The ones on this side I've already read and I want to read again, and the ones on this side are ones I haven't read yet. So try to keep them on their separate sides. And I was just like, what have I gotten myself into? So yeah, and I was going through copying these poems down and rereading things that I'd written to her. And it just, made me love her even more. About a month goes by, and I've been praying and discerning, and got to a point where I was like, we really need to talk. It's been about a month since that fateful night, and I have a lot to talk about, and I really need to know where she's at, because I'm getting to a point where I need to make a decision soon. And if she wants to be together, like, that's really what I want. And if that's what she wants, then we'll do that, and I'll finish this Jesuit thing later. But if she just wants to be friends, like, great, I can do this Jesuit thing and not worry about it. And so I asked her, hey, could we get together maybe before Easter and just talk? And she promised me she'd let me know when she had time. Well, then I thought, she's super busy. She's a double major. She volunteers all over the place. She's full-time RA. What if she doesn't have time before Easter? And so I thought of writing a letter as a backup plan, just in case. And so I wrote a letter, and I went to every female friend I had and asked them to read the letter and imagine they were Laura, and some guy who really loved them and was very sincere wrote such a letter. I asked them, tell me, what did you love about it? What moved you? What touched you? What's frightened you or confused you? What was clear? What was unclear? Is there anything you think I should change or take out or add? And so they gave me super, super helpful feedback. I drafted that letter 11, 12, 13 times until I felt like I couldn't change it anymore without losing something or adding something extraneous. And it's just over 4 pages, so it's a long one. But I just needed to let it out, like, how I loved her. Because it seemed like all my other efforts were failing to get through because I could never get a response from her. And I really, really desperately wanted to know so that I could choose between either two things or just choose the one thing, because I was afraid of making a wrong choice and losing something good and losing what I'd wanted since, again, I was in 6th grade. Because I'd never met anybody to that point as beautiful as her. Thoroughly beautiful, virtuously beautiful. And I didn't want to say, I'm going to go be a Jesuit. And then she just quietly kind of puts away any love she has for me to say, good for you, and let me go. And so I thought, if I didn't hear back from her about getting together by Easter or by April 1st, I would give her the letter so that she would have a month of school left to read it and respond in some way. Even as simple as a yes or a no would have sufficed. She wouldn't have to answer that long letter. And so I gave it to her on April 1st. Very clear that it wasn't an April Fool's Day joke, of course. And I said, please, once you've read it, just let me know that you've read it. You don't have to respond to it yet. Just let me know that you've read it so I know. Those days waiting for a response were deadly. I was just waiting and waiting. After a day goes by, I was like, well, she could have read it in a day, but no response. A week goes by. Oh, a week, come on. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. Finally, it's the end of the school year, and I'm in my room packing, having my things packed. They're loaded in my mom's van. And I have to wait for an RA to come and sign me out, to check my room, make sure everything's there and not broken. And Laura comes in, which of course I'm happy. And I wrote her a short letter of goodbye, gave it to her, and I asked her if she'd read the letter. And she's like, Jacob, I haven't had time to read it and to give it the time it deserves. I said, well, you've got the whole summer, and just shoot me an email when you've read it. She said she would. And I had a disposable camera with me, and as she was kind of, had her clipboard and everything, she just signed things out, and I said, hey, smile, and click. It's the only photograph I have of her. Let me see if I can find it. If I was thinking ahead of time, I would have grabbed it before I went live, but here we go. Photo album. Remember people used to have these things? Let's see. Get to the college years. Knights of Columbus. There it is. Yes, the one photograph I have of her. So summer came, and never heard back from her. And during the summer, I spent 6 weeks in Milwaukee with the Jesuits, just living with them, working at a couple of different apostolates. I helped with summer school at Marquette High. And then in the afternoons, I was at St. Patrick's running like a summer camp for Hispanic kids. And it was a riot. So much fun. The first 3 weeks of that, all I could think about was Laura, whether she'd read that letter. But about partway through, I realized how distracted I was by it. And I was like, Jesus, I'm here walking this road you've invited me down, and I have not been giving it the sacred attention it deserves. So I'm putting this whole Laura thing in your hands for the next 3 weeks. And I'm just going to focus completely on being here and on this work, and listening to you. And the last 3 weeks were wonderful. And we ended it with a weekend silent retreat down at Loyola Chicago in the old Jesuit residence there on the lake. And I remember one day in my room praying, and I didn't have a vision, but in my mind, I could see the silhouette of the head of Jesus on the cross and his crown of thorns. And I just had this deep sense that God was going to ask of me a tremendous sacrifice. And I remember just not saying anything to God, but just in my heart, just affirming, yeah, if you want a sacrifice to me, yes, God, I'll always say yes. But it did leave me very afraid, because I was like, well, gosh, what could it be, And so I did ask for an application when I left, because I felt like, if this is what God wants me to do, I think I could be happy doing it. And I want to be ready to go as soon as I make that decision. So I took an application home. End of the summer comes. I'm back at UNI. I'm walking to the student union with my best friend, Kendra, who is now Sister Maria Canisius, who is in the video I posted a link to earlier today. And we're walking along chatting, and she says, "Oh, there goes Laura." And I look, and sure enough, she's zipping through the crowd on her bike. And I take off running after her. Laura, Laura. And she turns and smiles, and now my heart stops. And she hops off her bike, and we hug each other. And I was like, "It's good to see you." She's like, "So good to see you. Do you want to walk with me?" So she's walking her bike, and I'm walking alongside her. I walk her to the little house she's staying in, and we just chat. And I remember her sitting down and propping her legs up and putting bags of ice on her shins. She had shin splints. And we were just chatting. And I didn't even think about the letter, anything like that. And she says, "We should get together soon and catch up." And I said, "Yeah, what about next week?" She's like, "How about Thursday morning?" Great. So Thursday morning rolls around, September 1st of 2015. So 15 years ago today. And I realize it's taken, almost 2 hours to get to this point, but I promised you the full story. And hopefully you've seen like all this past stuff was relevant. All the heartbreak, the high school drama, all of that shaped my heart to the heart that it was during this time, this crucial time of God listening to me and me starting to listen to him and him guiding me. All that stuff played its role in leading me to him. Because always in that brokenness, I still desired love and to give myself. And God held on to that desire and he protected it. My whole thing with knighthood and wanting to serve, he protected that. I remember my third year of college. So actually right around the time where we are in the story, I remember going to my RA in my dorm privately, just knocking on our door, introducing myself and saying, "I just want to let you know that I am a knight." And she kind of looked at me funny. He's like, "Blonde Knights Columbus. I've been dubbed a Sir Knight. So if you need anything at all, I am here to help. And you can always count on me to be of help for whatever you need." And she was really grateful and I think kind of impressed. Maybe it was weird at first, but I think she really respected that. But like, that's how I introduced myself. I used to sign my school papers, Sir Jake Boddicker, until I had a what was it? World history teacher point out in the constitutions of the United States that, titles of nobility will not be granted. And I was like, "Oh, sorry." So I stopped. But I was very proud. Like, that was a part of who I was. So God guarded and protected all of that because he saw their fertile ground for planting. So like that desire for knighthood, chivalry, service, what did he do? He planted that seed of the story of Ignatius and the Jesuit vocation right in that. What was he doing with this broken heart that desired beautiful, virtuous love? That's where we're going next. So we get together in my dorm. It's morning, maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock. She rode her bike and she actually brought it into my dorm because there wasn't anywhere outside to leave it safely. And we talked about our summers and what we were up to. And she was showing me pictures of a trip she took, I think, to Poland. And I gave her a couple of gifts that I gotten for her while I was in Milwaukee. And I talked about Milwaukee. And then when it kind of seemed like we ran out of things to talk about, I realized it'd been 5 months to the day that I'd given her the letter. And so I asked her if she'd read it. And she said no. Now, it's at this point that anytime I tell this story and there's a woman present, they shake their head and they kind of scowl. And they're like, "She read it. No woman could sit on a letter like that for 5 months and not read it." I don't know if she read it. She said she started it, but couldn't finish it because she was afraid of it. But everybody insists, at least all the women who hear this story insist, no, she read it. She had to have read it. So I was like, "Okay, fine. You don't need to read it. I'll just tell you." And so I just told her everything that I wrote. and where I was in my prayer and my discernment. And I remember intentionally being very careful not to come off as sounding like I had made a decision, because I very much had not. But I'd gone as far as I could down discerning both paths until I got to this crossroads of it's either her or the Jesuits. But since I didn't know how she felt about me, and if I'd be giving up a future with her by taking the Jesuit path, I was too afraid to make a decision. And I really, really needed to know. So I told her about my time in Milwaukee, and like, maybe God does want me to be a Jesuit. Maybe he does want me to be a priest. I don't know. But if he does, I think I could be happy. Well, then she started to weep. And up to that point in my life, I had never seen anyone weep like she wept. Like it was from the depths of her soul. I remember hearing tears on my tile floor falling from her face. And few words at a time, she finally just let it all out. Basically, she had loved me this whole time as much as I loved her. But whenever she prayed about what God's will was regarding us, it became clear and clear to her that God was doing something important in me, and he was inviting her to ponder all these things in her heart, cherish them, relish them, but to do what she could not to get in his way and compete with him over my heart. So she took all these things, the poems, the kindnesses, the good deeds, the help, the support, the encouragement, the possibility of a future together, and to put that all away to wait for God to show her it was okay to proceed. She also was doing it for my sake, because whatever God was doing in me, she wanted God to have all of me to himself for that. And so because she loved God, because she loved me so much, she put her own interests and desires aside. So much so that even though I can be pretty naive and just miss things, I could not get a clear indication of how she felt about me. And I thought it was because maybe I'm just hoping for something that's not there. But it's because she buried it so deeply under selflessness and love of God and me that I couldn't see it. So she let it all out. And I was floored. I had never been loved like that by anybody. And it just made me love her all the more. It's like, yes, I will marry this woman if that's what God wants and if that's what she wants. And so she just wept, and I just held her while she wept, soaked my shirt through and through. And for some reason, I felt very moved to ask her if I could wash her feet. And I didn't even question how strange that seemed. But before I could question it, the words were coming out of my mouth. And to my surprise, she said yes. And so she sat down in a chair, and I got my big popcorn bowl because it's the only thing I had that could put water in that her feet would fit in. And I went to the bathroom, filled it full of warm water, and I knelt down on the ground and I washed her feet. And she was just quiet and wiping tears and watching me. And I remember toweling off her feet and rubbing lotion on them, and then toweling them off again and putting her shoes back on her feet. And we just sat there quietly with each other before she looked at her watch and said, I have to leave. So she left. And I felt really good. Like, okay, finally, we've got everything out there. I can solve for X now. And maybe together we can pray and discern where God is calling us. And then it can make that choice. So that night I was talking to a friend from high school who had been her roommate the prior year and knew her really well, or 2 years prior, and knew her really well. And I was sharing our conversation and stuff. And her name is Holly. I don't know if she's watching, Holly Schultz. But I remember her telling me, like, Jacob, you're an idiot. And I was like, well, why? And, well, I know Laura. I lived with her for a year, and If that's what you told her, even though you didn't mean it, she probably takes it to mean you're going to be a priest. Now, if that's not your decision, and if you want to be with her, you better tell her soon, because once she decides and has made up her mind, you will not be able to change it back. I was like, crap. In spite of all my efforts, in spite of that letter, in spite of me trying to explain clearly where I was, what I desired, she was drawing a conclusion I did not intend for her to draw. And so the next day, I skipped class because like there are more important things I need to figure out right now. And I remember sitting in the student union with a little scrap of paper and a pencil, like my to-do list. Like, I need to talk to Laura soon. I need to pray. I need to trust God way more than I have been, because I realized basically my prayers meant, God, what do you want me to do? And God would say, Jacob, I want you to trust me. I'd say, yes, God, I trust you. Tell me what you want me to do. I want you to trust me. Oh, I trust you, God. Tell me what you want me to do, and I will do it. Jacob, I want you to trust me. Back and forth. What that really was less my having faith and trust in God and more my just wanting God to tell me what to do so I wouldn't make a mistake. Because my idea of discerning vocation was figuring out what's in God's head, figuring out what he wants me to do, and then doing it. Because my idea of obedience was somebody tells me what to do, and I do what I'm told to do. And then I can't be wrong. I can't make a mistake. I can't fail. It's very safe. God was asking a different level of obedience. He was basically saying, like Jesus to Peter, do you love me? Well, yeah, I love you. Feed my sheep. Now, he didn't tell Peter, and here's how I want you to do it. He's just like, here's what I want you to get done. And I trust that the love you have for me will guide you in doing it well and correctly and in a way that's pleasing to me. So what God was saying is, Jacob, you don't have to freak out about this. If you want her, go after her. Marry the girl. Have the 15 kids you want. And let me bless it. And just trust me. But if you really, really want to trust me deeply and surrender to me, well, then why don't you take this step and let me lead you down this path that you're very scared to go down. But whatever you do, Jacob, just make a choice because you love me. That's all, and let me bless it. So I realized that. I was like, wow, I really need to trust him more. And I also realized I need to show Laura so clearly without a doubt that I love her and I want to be with her. So that was the choice I made. It's like, you know what, God, this Jesuit thing's going to have to wait, because if I can't give up this opportunity to be with her. So I decided I love her. I want to be with her. I need to see her soon and talk to her. I need to show her I love her. I need to pray. I need to trust God. And so I thought, it's Labor Day weekend coming up. 3 days. I remember she said she's going home. I know where her family lives. It's 40 miles away. I bet I could make that in 3 days. And so I call my best friend, Kendra, because she has a car. I don't. I said, hey, Kendra, are you busy this evening? No, why? Could you take me to Walmart? I took you to Walmart on Sunday. Did you already eat all your food? I'm like, well, no, but I need to get some other things. Okay. Takes me to Walmart. She's pushing the cart. I'm throwing in an outdoor blanket, an emergency poncho, beef jerky, a loaf of bread, carrot sticks, bottled water, a rope. Because Lord of the Rings, Samwise felt bad because he didn't pack a rope. You never know when you're going to need it. So I was like, better throw in a rope. So she's seeing all this, like, what are you doing? And I told her, I'll tell you on the way back. So we're in her car on the way back with all my weird things that I bought. And I said, what are you doing tomorrow morning? She's like, what time tomorrow morning? I said, about 5:30, 6 o'clock. She's like, I'm sleeping. What are you doing? I said, I really need you to do a big favor for me. I need you to drop me off on the south end of town. She said, where? I said, on the side of the road. And she said, why? I said, because I'm going to walk to Laura's house and tell her I love her. I want to be with her. And she says, you're crazy. And if my parents find out that I'm doing that, I'll get in such big trouble. And I was like, Kendra, where are your parents? She said, they're in St. Louis. Why? I said, they're not here? No. Are they ever going to ask you, what did you do in your car this weekend? No. So they're not going to know you did it unless you tell them, right? Right? So don't tell them you dropped me off in the middle of nowhere. Then you won't get in trouble. And she was so nervous. But she did drop me off. And I started my long walk. And it was September 3rd by then. The Feast of St. Gregory the Great, who was my confirmation saint. I didn't realize that at the time. But once I was a novice and I learned his feast day, I realized, wow, my patron saint was watching over me big time. Because it got really hot that day for early September. And several things conspired against me. I did almost get run over because I was walking down the shoulder of Interstate 380. Speed limit was 70 miles an hour. And I was on the paved shoulder because I'm an idiot. And so there's trucks and cars going by, a few feet away at like 75 miles an hour. And I'm just like praying and thinking about Laura and about God and just chugging along. So yeah, it got really hot. I was going through my water pretty quickly. I also noticed my feet just felt like they were on fire. And I remember sitting under an overpass just as I was crossing the county line from Blackhawk County to Lynn County. I sat under an overpass, took off my shoes and socks. The blisters were horrific. So if this was my foot and these are my toes, so this big like padded part of the front of your foot, that was all just one huge blister, like the size of a ketchup packet. And it felt like a ketchup packet, frankly. The ends of both of my middle toes were purple. They're just big blood blisters. The ends of a couple of my toes had blisters on them. It was bad. It was really bad. But, I was like, I got to do this. So I just put an extra sock on each foot for some padding and kept going. Eventually I got down to so I had 3 bottles of water with me. And I only had half a bottle left. And I was only halfway done. And it was really hot. And I was starting to worry, like, if I run out of water, like, that's going to get dangerous. And one thing about interstates is they don't go near anyone's house. So if ever there was a house within, a quarter of a mile of the interstate, I walked over there, knocked on the door, hoping I could get water. And no one was home ever, or they wouldn't answer their door. And so it got to a point where I was thinking of calling my friend Kendra, like, you got to come get me. I can't finish. And finally, this car, and I almost got run over once. Somebody was pulling a U-Haul trailer and was like skidding out of control. And I heard this. I looked and I saw it careening. I jumped in the ditch and went right where I was standing. So that was the only time I was in peril other than dehydration. Few people pulled over, asked if I needed a ride. I said, no, I got to finish. I got to walk. And I'd explain, and they thought that was really weird. But just when I was getting ready to give up, this car pulls over. I wasn't waving around anybody. I wasn't sticking up my thumb. And I looked in the window, and I saw the driver's seat was this really skinny kid with a striped shirt and a beanie, like the little cap with the propeller on it. And the guy in the driver's seat looked like Bane from The Dark Knight Rises. He was huge, ripped, bald. Didn't have a mask on, but yeah. But they didn't seem dangerous. And the driver is like, hey, dude, do you need a ride? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. It's like, all right, get in. And so we get in, takes off. It's like, never picked up a hitchhiker before. Like, well, I technically didn't wave you down, so I'm not a hitchhiker. You just pulled over. It's like, oh, yeah, that's true. So, like, where are you from, man? So I'm a student at UNI. And he said, what? We are too. Like, why are you walking on the side of the road? Are you homeless or something? And I said, no, I'm walking to a girl's house to tell her I love her and I want to be with her. And he's like, that is the coolest thing I've ever heard. And he starts talking about how, like, oh man, when I get back to the school, we need to start telling everybody, like, have everybody waiting for you to get back so we can do like the slow clap and cheer you on. And I was like, no, don't do that. And so he's like, well, where can we take you? So just take me to this town up here so I can go to the gas station and get water. And they said, okay. So pull up to the gas station. Just as I'm about to open the door, they lock the doors. And I thought they'd like accidentally hit the wrong button. But he said, like, I can't let you out. And I said, why not? He said, well, I've been thinking about it. Like, this is really dangerous. And I don't want to turn on the news when I get home tonight from this concert we're going to and see a picture of you and say, we found this dude on the side of the road dead. So I'm going to feel like it was my fault. So tell me where she lives and I'll take you there. I said, you don't understand. I have to walk this. I have to finish this. You can't just drop me off there. And he said, I'm not letting you out of this car until, you let me take you there. And so we argued. And I said, fine. Drop me off at exit such and such, because then it's only a few more miles and it's country highways and it's a lot safer. And he said, okay. So we pull away and go. He drops me off the exit and he leaves. And that's when I realized, like, and I forgot to get water. So I drink the last half of my bottle of water and start limping. So by this time, my feet are just useless. And I'm going house to house and knocking on doors and no one's answering. And I'm dying of thirst. I took an apple out of my bag and I remember biting the apple and eating the bite and then just like licking the exposed apple just so my tongue would feel wet and not as thirsty. And I was eating baby carrots because they had moisture in them and I was just dying and I was so thirsty. I was like, but I'm this close. I can't give up now. Finally, I see one last house on this road. And I knock on the door and I tell myself, if no one answers, I'm done. I'm going to sit on the side of the road, call my friend and come and get me. And this old man opens his back door and I introduced myself and I said, I'm just walking down this road and I'm out of water. Could I have some water? And so I give him my 3 empty water bottles and he goes in to fill them up. And as soon as he gives them back, I drank one empty right away. And he said, what are you doing walking out here? There's no towns on this road. And I said, there's a young lady that lives just a few miles down the road from here. And I'm walking to her house to tell her I love her and I want to be with her. And he kind of smiles and he says, well, I'm glad you're doing this because if you didn't, by the time you got to my age, you'd regret it. So I hope it works out for you. And I just took that as like a sign, like I'm doing the right thing. This is a good idea. So I thank him and I head on my way, limping along and stopping more and more often because I'm just exhausted. And I finally get to her yard and I just drop everything. And I had a cardboard tube strapped across my chest with a rose in it. So I took the rose out and I just limped up to her door and rang the doorbell. And she answered it. And I just fell at her feet. I had nothing left. And I remember like my arms were wrapped around her feet and I tried to say, I love you. I don't know if that's what came out because I was kind of not all there. And I heard her say my name and she yelled for her sister, who I didn't even think would also be there. And so they picked me up and put me in a chair. Her sister went to get a glass of water and Laura picked up my feet and propped them up on a chair. She said, what are you doing here? And I said, Laura, I love you and I don't want to lose you. And she said, well, let's not do this now. Let's just be glad you're here. And so her sister gave me a glass of water. I was like, Jacob, what are you doing here? What a surprise. Like, I wanted to surprise your sister. Because I kind of missed her and I thought it'd be nice to visit with her over Labor Day break. And her sister's like, well, you should have just asked for a ride. I was like, well, I didn't think about it till after she left. And she's like, well, this is crazy, but it's cool you're here. We're gonna go to our mom's birthday party in a little bit. So if you want to take a shower and put some clean clothes on, you can come with us. And I was like, I did not even think about like what plans she might have this weekend, or about like the fact like she's going home to her family will be there. What am I gonna say? And so I did. I went and took a really long shower because I was exhausted, put on clean clothes, surprised everybody at this birthday party. I was limping around and walking on my heels because the front sides of my feet especially were destroyed. And then that evening we talked, and long story short, I was too late. She had already made up her mind, talked to friends, talked to family, cried it out, and had closed the door and locked it and welded it. And there was no opening it again. And once she shared that with me, I was like, well, there's plenty of daylight left. Just, let me grab my things when we get back, or let me grab my things and I'll be on my way. I don't want to be in your way this weekend. She said, no, you're in no shape to walk back. So you're just gonna have to stay here this weekend and I'll take you back on Monday. So I thought, oh yes, I've got the weekend to win her back. I won her family over because her parents had not met me yet, but they'd heard a lot about me. And so I was helping out with farm chores as best I could. And they made a special dinner for me. And it was wonderful. And her family really liked me. And it just like drove the stake in deeper of how deeply I wanted her to be my wife, because I wanted to be a part of that family. And it seemed like they wanted me to be a part of it too. But as the weekend went on, I was just a cold distance. Perfect hospitality from Laura, but there was no warmth. And I realized I had made a huge mistake and I'd hurt her deeply by coming. And I regretted it. And, I tried to like do everything I could to kind of win her over, but it was nothing, not going to fly. And so we talked all the way back that Monday. I apologized for coming, and I admit it was a huge mistake. And she shared with me how much our relationship had meant the past couple of years, and it got her through some really difficult times. But she just wanted to focus on school and to let me focus on my thing. And she thought, maybe somewhere down the road, after done with school and after you've figured this Jesuit thing out, maybe we can be together. I don't know. So that's kind of where we left it, agreeing to still be friends, but a relationship was not in the cards, the immediate future. So for the next month and some, I would see her from time to time, and I would invite her like, hey, my friends and I are going to go to a movie, or we're going to go out. Do you want to come with? And never get a response back. And I got to the point where I just emailed her and said, I have to let you go. I can't keep hoping for a friendship that isn't alive anymore. I never see you, never answer my emails, and I can't help but think it's not because you're busy. And I understand. So this is goodbye. And I let her go. And the next few months were really hard. My best friend, a couple weeks after that, admitted to me that she really had very strong feelings for me. And I told her, like, I get that, but right now I can't love anybody because I am so hurt. I will just hurt you. I just have to ask you to please be my friend. And she was the best friend. I remember, because I had such bad blisters, like 3 of my toenails fell off. They grew out. They grew back fine, but that's how bad the blisters were. And I remember my friend would come over to my dorm, grab my popcorn bowl, sneak into the boys' bathroom to fill it full of hot water, put Epsom salt in it so that I could soak my feet. And she would just spend time with me. And I remember one time just like feeling so dead inside that I was just sitting on the floor, and she just sat behind me and like put her arms around my shoulders and was just there. And I could not have asked for a better friend for my heart during that time. She guarded it so well. Again, putting her own desires and interests aside because she saw I needed something more. And so a few months go by, and I promise I'm getting to the end of my vocation story. For those of you who have hung in here for so long, I was invited by the young man who was leading the church choir to consider auditioning for the university choir, because he thought, you're really good at singing. You like to sing. I think you'd enjoy being part of a bigger ensemble. And they're going to have auditions for the university choruses next week. You should try out, because even if you don't get into the more exclusive groups, everybody gets in the university chorus. And I think you'd really enjoy it. It's like, whatever. So I go to the music building to get an application to sign up for auditions. And I'm walking down the hall, and one of the choir teachers is walking this way. Her name is Dr. Lamartine. And I had met her once the prior year because my friend Kendra was in choir, and I went to a concert, and she wanted to introduce me to her teacher, saying, she's so wonderful. You would love to meet her. And so she introduced me. So Dr. Lamartine's coming. I haven't seen her in a year. I don't remember her name. And she says, you're Jake, aren't you? Kendra's friend. And I was blown away that she remembered me. But more importantly, I was in such a low, hurt spot in my life, feeling so alone and rejected and broken, that when she said my name, I felt seen in a way that I hadn't felt in a while. And I felt like a little bit of light had cracked into that darkness. And I said, yeah, that's me. That's amazing you remembered. She's like, yeah, I remember you. Why are you here? I said, well, I've been encouraged to audition for the choir. She's like, great. I can't wait to hear your audition. That'll be wonderful. I'm like, okay. So I signed up for the audition, and then I'm reading the fine print, and there's this piece of music attached to it. And to me, it just looks like a bunch of black scribbles online. I was like, I don't know what that is. And so I emailed her. I was like, look, there's no way I'm going to learn this in a week. Is that still okay? She said, yeah, just come prepared to sing something so we have an idea of your voice. Okay. And so I came to my audition, and I sang O Come Emmanuel, because that's what we were singing in church at the time. It was Advent. And she ran me through some scales and things, and the other choir professor was there too. And after they ran me through all that stuff, they stepped aside and were talking, and they said, what's your schedule for next semester? I said, oh, it's this, and this, but I could move this around and probably fit in, one of the choirs. I'm like, well, we're asking because we really want you for our top 2 ensembles, but you might have to drop a class. And I was like, gladly. To be in 2 choirs? Oh my gosh. So I was floored. Like, I got into the 2 top choruses at Northern Iowa. And they said, and you also need to start taking music lessons to develop the voice that you have, because it's really good, but it could be so much better. And so I started taking music lessons with a young lady named Cindy Shadrick, who was just bubbly and enthusiastic and gorgeous. And, being locked in a small closet and a piano with her once a week was both terrifying and wonderful. But really began to uncover this gift for singing I never realized I had. And I told Dr. Lamartine that, yes, I'll join your choirs, but you have to understand, I'm kind of thinking about entering the seminary, so you might only have me for a semester. And she said, that's fine. A couple weeks in, I'm sitting outside the choir room praying a rosary, waiting for her to come and unlock it. And she sees me. And at this time, I have long hair. I sometimes wore a ponytail, sometimes not, and a beard. Not as long as this, short. And so a lot of people would say, you know who you look like? Like, who? Tell me. I have no idea. So she came up to me and said, Jacob, I had a dream about you last night. It's like, really? She said, yes. I had a dream, and instead of calling you Jacob, I kept calling you Jesus. And there wasn't anything really extraordinary about it, but it felt like the most natural thing in the world to call you Jesus. And it was just a really peaceful dream. And you were a part of it. And I just wanted to share that with you. And I was blown away because here I was, I had an application. I'd started filling it out, but I stopped because I realized I was only filling it out because I felt like there was nothing else left to do with my life, so I might as well. But I stopped because I realized that is a really bad way to make a decision this important. I needed to wait until I felt free and happy to do it. And so I really thought about what she'd shared with me, and I realized, here's this woman who barely knows me. Catholic, doesn't go to church, doesn't practice her faith. But it doesn't seem weird to her to call me Jesus. And I felt like maybe she saw something in me that I'd lost sight of. And I took that as God's way of saying, take the next step, Jacob. And so I filled out the application. I emailed the vocations director, said, I'm gonna apply. Went through the physical that March, spent a week in Milwaukee getting psychologically analyzed, interviewed, and everything, just like the most thorough dissection of my life ever. And got back to the university, and it was just a few weeks later, on April 4th of 2006, I got an email from the vocation director saying, hey, call me tonight so I can talk to you about something important. Okay. And so at night I was working at this Catholic Student Center. I was a peer minister at that time. And he said, hey, congratulations, you got accepted. And I was thrilled. And I said, hey, we're brothers now. He said, yeah, we are. Congratulations. First thing I did was started writing an email to Laura to tell her that I'd been accepted. I felt like she was the first one. She deserved to be the first to know. While I was doing that, two friends came in, one of whom is a priest now of the diocese, the Archdiocese of Dubuque. His girlfriend at the time is now happily married with some kids of her own. But they came in and read over my shoulder what I was writing, just like to be, playfully annoying. But when they read what I was typing, they both like squeezed my shoulders and ran downstairs. And I said, don't tell them, I'll be down in a second. So I sent off the email, went downstairs and told the priest and the sister and a bunch of other people like that I'd gotten accepted. Congratulatory. So my friends threw a surprise congratulations / going away party. I started giving away all my stuff. And I just felt so joyful and free. And I'd finally gotten that guidance. And I never saw Laura again, never heard from her again. And it wasn't until really the end of my novitiate that I wanted to be a priest. And that's a story for another time. But the short version of that is I wanted to be a father and a husband. God wanted me to be a priest. I thought those were two different things. But after that whole discernment process and 2 years of novitiate, God helped me to see that if you're really going to be a priest, you have to be a Joseph to the church. To not serve the church out of simple do what you're told level obedience, but to serve the church because you love her as the bride of Christ and you want to protect and serve her as Joseph protected and served Our Lady, who was by law his spouse, but in her heart and soul, she belonged to God alone. And God, because he loved and trusted Joseph, wanted to share his joy with him to a degree, and also entrusted one of his greatest earthly treasures to his care. Every priest has been entrusted with the whole church, not just a parish, the whole church. And you might say, well, Father, that's a little extreme. Think about it. Anytime you hear in the news of a priest who breaks his vows, who abuses somebody, who causes scandal, it hurts the whole church. The whole church feels betrayed. That's because God has entrusted the whole church to every priest, deacon, and bishop in one way or another. And I think the more a priest sees himself as a Joseph to the bride of Christ, the more fulfilled he's going to be, and the better his priest is going to be. God also showed me there's a reason we call priests Father. And God helped me to see, you want to be a father. I will trust you with all my children, all the members of the church, 1 billion worldwide. And every one of them that you meet, they'll call you Father. And I want that to be true of you. I want you to love and serve my people as if they were your own children. I don't want you to just be a church leader, a dispenser of sacraments. I want you to be a father of souls. Once he helped me to see that my desire for a spouse, my desire to be a father, could not only be fulfilled, but radically fulfilled as a priest, I realized I've wanted to be a priest my whole life. Yes, Lord, let me take my vows. Let me begin the journey to ordination. And I've never second guessed that, ever once. And at the end of my novitiate, right before vows, I sent an invitation to Laura and a letter sharing what I'd learned, what I've realized. I apologize for hurting her. And I got a lovely little letter back thanking me profusely for that message, wishing me all the best, promising prayers, but saying she couldn't come because that same weekend she was moving to Florida to start her master's. And that's the last I heard from her. And I've never bumped into her or heard from her since, which is fine. She's moved on. She's married, has kids, has a career. She's a doctor now. So, yeah. So that's my vocation story. That's the director's extended edition, exclusive cut, the Snyder cut, if you will, for all my DC nerd fans. But every year during this first week of September, that's all the stuff I reflect on, because it was September 1st, 15 years ago this year. That was that day of tears, and that day of like hearts being broken open to the Lord and honesty before him. And the days ahead, I'll be thinking about that long walk and thinking about the things that were to come, after that. And my best friend Kendra, as I mentioned, is now Sister Maria Canisius. She tells her own vocation story in the video I posted in my previous post. We ended up at St. Louis University together. I was studying philosophy and she was working on her master's. And so just as she was there to support me, as I was discerning my vocation, God blessed us with the opportunity for me to be there to support her and hers. Who would have seen that coming? And the love that she had for me and the desire she had to be in a relationship with me during my time of heartbreak, where did that lead her? To the Lord. Because by the time she was discerning her vocation, I remember sitting at a movie theater waiting for a movie to start. And she, like, her eyes open wide. She took this deep breath and like leaned back in her chair. I was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And she said, I just realized, like, when I think of my future and I think of the man I want to be with, the only man that keeps coming to mind is Jesus. And I really think I'm called to religious life. I was like, awesome. So that's how I got here. That's why I'm a priest today. That's how he led me through all the drama of middle school and high school, introducing me to beauty, to lead me to him, helping me get in touch with my loneliness and my desire to love and to give myself in love, waking me to the importance of virtue, of integrity, of honor, service, living in a way counter to the world, and being okay with that, and longing for something more than just this, and learning to listen to God. He led me to this. It was always either Laura or the Jesuits. It was never, diocesan or religious. What order? I don't know. He made it very clear. It's this or this. And then he also made it clear, choose one and let me bless it. Just trust me and love me. Make a decision because you trust me and you love me. Whichever one you choose. You can have either one. I won't be mad at you. But I tell you, Jacob, if you choose marriage and you choose the path that you've been walking your whole life, yes, you'll be happy. Yes, it will be blessed. But you will always have moments where you wonder if there's more, because I've made your heart for more. And once he was able to show me how big my heart could really be, that everybody thinks 15 kids is a ridiculous number. But then when he says, Jacob, you could be the father of 1 billion and love them all, I was like, that sounds awesome. It's like we've wanted a wife who was beautiful and virtuous and good. My son is offering you the bride of Christ. There is no bride more beautiful and virtuous than her. Would you marry her as Joseph wed the Blessed Virgin? Who says no to that? You might as well have, I don't know. I can't even think of who I think is the most beautiful actress. I don't know, Jennifer Garner or Kate Blanchett or somebody being like, hey, you want to get married? Like, who would say no to that? I mean, maybe they would. Marriage in Hollywood doesn't work out, but just, like such overwhelming beauty and goodness. You're just like, yes, why? Who says no to that? It's so good. It wasn't that. It's like, that's what you want, Lord, so I'll do it. But it was so good that I couldn't say no. And I could joyfully say yes. So that's my vocation story. That's what, as soon as I saw what day it was today, that's all the stuff I've been thinking about all day. So I hope you've enjoyed. This is the first time I've recorded my entire vocation story in all of its length and detail that I can recall. So I hope you enjoy it. Please share it. If there are people you think would be interested, inspired by listening to it and have the patience for 2.5 hours of me blabbing, share it all over the place. If you think it will help somebody in their own discernment, if you think it'll be good for a non-Catholic to hear, like why at least this man became a priest, share it. It's God gave it to me. He didn't ask me to pay for it. I made myself pay for it. All my wounds are self-inflicted. But share it. It's the church's story now. I belong to the church. So share away. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you've been edified, uplifted, encouraged, and blessed by it. Please always pray for me. Because I need prayers. I'm not done being a priest or being formed or shaped. So I can always be better. So please pray for me. I pray for you. God bless you. And let's say a prayer and say good night. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, I thank you for the gift of this opportunity to share the work that you have done in my soul. I place this entirely in your hands, Father, that this story may be to your glory and your purpose in the lives of those who hear it. Let all goodness and excitement and good and fruit and glory from this story go to you and help souls. I only ask you, Father, to continue to help me, to aid me, to become the priest that you and your people deserve. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good night, everybody, and God bless you. Oh gosh, YouTube comments. Hi, YouTube. Luke, thank you for being here. I'm glad you turned out. Turned up. Hello, Emmylou and Grace and September. You're very welcome. Thanks for the hug, Josh. Hey, Claude, I'm glad you were able to tune in. If you weren't able to see the whole thing, you have a lot of catching up to do, but the video will be up on YouTube, so you can watch the whole thing over the course of a few days, probably. So good night, everyone. Thanks for watching.